Coming up on our newscast tonight. After hosting two separate high-level delegations from Pyongyang during the Winter Olympics, Seoul returns the favor by sending its own special envoys. They carry with them President Moon's message to the regime's leader. North Korea confirms it will send a 24-member delegation, including officials and athletes, to the Pyeongchang Paralympics. A significantly smaller squad, as artists and cheerleaders are not included this time. During China's parliamentary gathering, it's decided that last year's growth target will be maintained, while the move to scrap a two-term presidential limit is set to be ratified during the sessions. NEWSCENTER begins now. It's 8 p.m. here in Korea, coming to you live from our studio in Seoul. This is Arirang News Center. Welcome to our program. I'm Daniel Choi. A high-ranking South Korean delegation is currently meeting with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un only hours after landing in Pyongyang. Our chief Chongwon correspondent Moon Geon-young starts us off with the historic encounter.
South Korean President Moon Jae-in's special delegation, led by his top national security advisor Chung Eui-yong and represented by his chief intelligence officer, arrived in Pyongyang Monday afternoon, 1 hour after taking off from Seoul Air Base, marking the first such visit under the Moon administration and the first in 11 years. The 10-member delegation that includes intelligence chief Seo-hun, who has been involved in the coordination of the two previous inter-Korean summits in 2000 and 2007, and Vice Unification Minister Chun Hae-sung, another veteran official in North Korean affairs, was met by Ri San-kwon, North Korea's point man on inter-Korean affairs, and others at the Sunan International Airport in Pyongyang.
Following 15 minutes of negotiations on the South Korean delegation's itinerary in North Korea, the two sides agreed to attend dinner hosted by North Korean leader Kim Jong-un at 6 p.m. Seoul time.
This marks the first time the reclusive state leader has met any South Korean official since he took power upon his father's death in late 2011. The special envoys from Seoul are believed to be carrying a letter from Mr. Moon to Mr. Kim.
The South Korean delegation is staying at Gobangsan Guest House, a luxurious resort along the Taedong River in Pyongyang. The delegation believes North Korea has made lots of preparations to best accommodate the South Koreans.
Prior to leaving for Pyongyang Monday, President Moon's chief special envoy to the North held a news conference at the Blue House.
I will certainly deliver President Moon's firm resolve to achieve a denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula and genuine and permanent peace on the Korean Peninsula. My team and I will also push for in-depth talks to find ways to help arrange the restart of dialogue between North Korea and the US.
North Korea has repeatedly said it will not put its nuclear program on a negotiating table, while the United States has made it clear that it doesn't want talks for the sake of talks and said all options, including military measures, are on the table. After wrapping up their two-day trip to Pyongyang, the South Korean envoys will fly to Washington for follow-up discussions with the Trump administration. Moon Geon-young, Arirang News, the Blue House.
South Korea's top office has assessed North Korea's meet and greet of President Moon's high-level delegation thoughtful. Our Kim Mo-kyun combs through day one of the special envoy's two-day visit to shed light on Pyongyang's intentions.
Contrary to speculations that North Korean leader would meet the South Korean envoys on their second and last day of their visit, the North Korean leader welcomed the delegation on their very first day, just a few hours after they arrived in Pyongyang. South Korea's presidential office of Chongwon said that the envoys arrived shortly before 3 p.m., about an hour after their departure. The North's Korean Central Broadcasting Station said that the group was greeted by Ri San-kwon, chief of the North Korean agency in charge of inter-Korean affairs. And a few hours later, they were welcomed by Kim Jong-un himself at the Gobangsan Guest House. The gesture is considered quite unusual, as the North's past leaders usually held their first encounters with their guests on the last day of their visit. An expert in the industry said that the North Korean leaders' encounter of the envoys on their first day could hint a slight change in the North's attitude towards South Korea.
I think the fact that the North Korean leader met the envoys on the very first day could mean that Pyongyang is opting for more dynamic talks with South Korea, even regarding Seoul's ultimate goal of denuclearizing the Korean peninsula.
However, he also added that North Korea is taking a cautious move at the same time by looking at the venue of their encounter.
They met at the Gobangsan guest house, which is located in the outskirts of Pyongyang. I think that this shows that North Korea is concerned of the leader's safety and security as well.
The South Korean envoys are scheduled to continue their visit through Tuesday, and although nothing is confirmed yet regarding a second meeting with Kim, Monday's unexpected reception could signify otherwise. Kim Mo-kyun, Arirang News.
South Korea's special envoys travel with a twofold mission. One, discuss ways to improve inter-Korean ties, perhaps leading to a third inter-Korean summit. And two, create a setting for talks between Washington and Pyongyang. What will the South Korean delegation bring back from the north? Our Oh Jung-hee takes a closer look.
One of the most pressing tasks for the South Korean envoys visiting the north is whether they'll be able to find room or pave the way for dialogue between North Korea and the U.S. That is, whether North Korean leader Kim Jong-un would give out any clear-cut answer on talking with the U.S. under the condition of denuclearization. Bridging the gap between Pyongyang and Washington won't be easy. The U.S. has consistently pressed North Korea to denuclearize if it wants to talk, whereas Pyongyang just over the weekend lashed out, setting any sort of condition for talks as, quote, preposterous.
I believe North Korea has sent some sort of signal to South Korea, though we don't know whether it's a positive one or a negative one. Seoul and Washington must have talked about this before South Korea decided to dispatch special envoys to North Korea.
Exchanging views with Pyongyang on improving inter-Korean ties is another mission for the envoys. Seoul could seek to create chances for separated families' reunions, resume tours to North Korea's Mount Kumgang, and reopen the inter-Korean Kaesong industrial complex. But experts believe the spotlight will fall on any indication that could hint to dialogue between Pyongyang and Washington.
Improving inter-Korean ties won't be difficult because Kim Jong-un has brought that up in his 2018 New Year's address. But to achieve that, issues like resuming Mount Kumgang tours and reopening the closed Kaesong industrial complex have to be solved, which are directly linked with sanctions. So the North's relations with the U.S. will probably top the agenda.
The 10-member delegation to North Korea includes two ministerial-level figures, both of whom have kept close contact with U.S. security authorities. Their presence also symbolizes Seoul's willingness to improve ties with Pyongyang. South Korea hopes to maintain and improve the inter-Korean dialogue momentum, hoping that it can be expanded to ties between Washington and Pyongyang before April starts, as that's the month when the postponed Seoul-Washington joint military drills are set to take place. Oh Jung-hee, Arirang News.
The latest exchange of envoys between two Koreas reflect the South's efforts to keep the Olympic-driven dialogue momentum going. But in order for any improvement across the border, Pyongyang must sit down for talks with Washington. That was made crystal clear by Seoul's top diplomat on Monday. Here's Park Hee-jun with more.
South Korea says it will keep up its momentum of dialogue from the Pyeongchang Olympics to push North Korea onto the path of denuclearization. Speaking at the 2018 World Journalists Conference on Monday, South Korean Foreign Minister Kang Kyung-hwa said that North Korea must take measures towards denuclearization for dialogue to take place. Although the recent inter-Korean talks were a positive outcome of a series of consistent efforts, Kang emphasized that the North needs to redirect its nuclear stance for a peaceful resolution to the nuclear issue. And a peaceful resolution also requires direct talks between the United States and North Korea.
But we are well aware that inter-Korean dialogue and improvements in South-North Korean relations cannot proceed in the absence of progress in the efforts to peacefully resolve the North Korean nuclear issue, which requires, in the first instance, direct talks between the United States and North Korea.
Foreign Minister Kang also said that sanctions and pressure on the regime will continue unless it takes substantial measures towards denuclearization. Although the Moon Jae-in administration wishes to seek a peaceful resolution to the issue, it plans to work closely with the United States to pressure Pyongyang to change course.
So far, North Korea has not indicated any desire to engage in denuclearization talks with the United States. But it knows very well that with the heavy sanctions placed upon it, its key interest cannot be secured without coming to terms with the United States.
She added that South Korea will also maintain close cooperation with key partners in the region for a smooth transition to dialogue and with the rest of the international community to solve the nuclear crisis and establish a lasting peace regime on the Korean peninsula. Park Hee-jun, Arirang News.
During a meeting with his top aides, President Moon Jae-in appreciates the parliament's efforts to pass the shorter working hours bill. At a weekly meeting, the South Korean leader also called on his government to ensure the drive leads to job creation and better working conditions. Hwang Ho-jun shares with us his remarks.
The South Korean president expresses appreciation for Parliament passing the revision to the Labor Standards Act last week, which reduced the maximum legal working hours from the current 68 hours to 52 hours per week.
노동시간 단축으로 국민의 삶이 달라지게 되었습니다. 노동시간 단축은 일자리를 늘릴 수 있는 절호의 기회입니다.
During his meeting with top aides on Monday afternoon, President Moon called for the government's utmost efforts to make sure the recent cut in maximum working hours will ultimately lead to the creation of new jobs and reduce the high youth unemployment rate.
정부는 노동시간 단축이 일자리 나누기와 청년 고용으로 이어지도록 적극적인 지원 방안을 마련해 주기 바랍니다.
As of January, the unemployment rate of those aged 15 to 29 stood at 8.7%, far higher than the overall average of 3.7%. During the meeting, President Moon also stressed that shorter working hours will lead to the improvement of overall working and living conditions. He said the initiative will help cultivate an environment where workers can have family dinners and secure a decent work-life balance, which in turn, according to the president, could be the key to solving the serious issue of the nation's record low birth rate. According to the OECD, South Korea had the longest working hours among OECD members, with an average of 2,069 hours in 2016. President Moon said he wants to cut that number down to 1,800 a year before the end of 2022. Hwang Ho-jun, Arirang News.
On June 13th, Koreans will head to the polls for the local elections. Rival lawmakers managed to pass a redistricting bill that's expected to breed confusion for potential candidates. As this is the first such event under President Moon Jae-in, it will help gauge where the public stands on the administration's first-year performance. Kim Min-ji has the latest from the domestic political arena.
The National Assembly on Monday passed a long-overdue redistricting bill for the June 13th local elections. By law, the electoral map has to be finalized 6 months prior to the election, meaning December 13th last year, but political wrangling kept lawmakers from having the bill ready on time. The new map adds a combined 27 more positions for city and provincial councillors, except for Jeju Special Self-Governing Province and the administrative city of Sejong, for a total of 690 posts. As for council members, there will be 29 more posts for a nationwide total of 2,927. That's more than 3,600 positions up for grabs, not counting the key posts of mayor, governor, and education superintendent in 17 cities and provinces. A mini general election is also in the works, as about 10 parliamentary seats are going to be vacant, with some lawmakers giving up their post to run for local office, plus some who have been stripped of their position. With just 3 months left, the priorities of the rival parties will be to field the best possible candidate in hopes of keeping the posts they have now, or if they're lucky, adding new ones. It's also the first nationwide poll under the Moon Jae-in administration, meaning the results will be a barometer of how the public assesses the young government. Preliminary registration is open for candidates running for mayor, district office chief, education superintendent, and local councillor. Registration for county council members will start in April. Once registered, candidates can start campaigning, open their election offices, and start sending material to voters in their constituencies. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
The Korean government held an emergency meeting Monday to address the rise of protectionist measures out of Washington, including last week's announcement of new tariffs on steel.
We are very aware of the recent developments in the overseas trade environment. We'll closely examine the possibility of growing conflict in global trade, its impact on Korea's exports and the global economy, and address external risks swiftly.
Today's session involved the Ministers of Foreign Affairs, Trade, Energy and Industry, and others. Finance Chief Kim said Korea will convey its concerns about the trade frictions to the U.S. at the G20 meeting of finance ministers and central bankers later this month. He added the government will work closely with Korean businesses and focus on a strategy of diversifying the nation's exports, including strengthening trade ties with Southeast Asian countries. The new tariff on steel and aluminum caused quite an uproar, with EU, China, and Canada basically saying two can play that game. This could mark the start of a global trade war. Some experts predict a long-term negative impact on Korea's economy. For details, let's turn to our Jong-un.
The off-the-cuff announcement by U.S. President Donald Trump that he would impose heavy tariffs on all steel imports has already set off a ripple of responses from world leaders. The EU, Canada, and China have said that if these tariffs are finalized, they will take reciprocal measures to impose taxes on American products. There is evident tension between the U.S. and China. Beijing says it's ready to impose tariffs on American agricultural products, an apparent move targeting U.S. farmers, who are an important support base for President Trump. The threat of a trade war is particularly concerning for South Korea, as more than 80% of its GDP comes from trade.
The U.S. and China make up around 35% of South Korea's total exports. So if both countries start adopting protectionist measures, it would be a blow to Korean industries that rely on exports to those countries, such as cars, electronics, and steel.
Meanwhile, the EU has said it would start looking to impose tariffs on American products like Harley-Davidson motorcycles, bourbon whiskey, and Levi's jeans. Canada, the #1 steel exporter to the U.S., has also said it's ready to take reciprocal action if tariffs are imposed on its steel and aluminum products. The Seoul government expects further tariffs on cars and semiconductors as Trump sees the car industry as the sector in which South Korea saw the greatest trade surplus with the U.S. To this, South Korean President Moon Jae-in said,
정부와 기업이 합심하여 노력하면 얼마든지 극복할 수 있다는 자신감을 갖고 대응해 나가야 할 것입니다.
Experts say that aiming for multilateral negotiations would be the best way for South Korea to minimize trade blows in the long run.
South Korea should proactively participate in trade deals such as the Trans-Pacific Partnership or mega-regional FTAs for the long-term growth of its economy.
Jong-un, Arirang News.
The two Koreas will march as one when the curtain rises for the Paralympics on March 9th. Compared to the recently ended Winter Games, the regime will be sending a considerably smaller delegation this time. Ji Myung-gil has the full story.
Kim Mun-chul, the chair of the North Korean Federation for the Protection of the Disabled, will lead a 4-member delegation of officials from its Paralympics committee. Besides the officials, 20 other people, including 6 athletes, will comprise Pyongyang's Paralympic delegation. They will enter into South Korea on Wednesday using the western land route.
North Korean athletes will participate in the cross-country skiing events on March 11th and 14th and return home around March 15th.
The International Paralympic Committee invited North Korea to the Pyeongchang Winter Paralympics and offered 2 bipartite slots to athletes to compete in para-Nordic skiing events. Sit skiers Kim Jong-hyun and Ma Yu-chul were given the spots. At the Paralympics opening ceremony, the two Koreas will once again march under the Korean unification flag, which bears the image of a sky blue Korean peninsula against a white background. They will be the last group among the 49 countries to enter the stadium. The two Koreas reached an agreement regarding North Korea's participation in the Pyeongchang Paralympics during working-level talks on February 27th. Pyongyang will not be sending an art troupe and a cheering squad for the Paralympics. Pyeongchang will host the largest Paralympics so far, with 570 athletes from 49 countries having confirmed their participation. Ji Myung-gil, Arirang News.
China is holding its annual parliamentary sessions. It began with the much-anticipated announcement of maintaining its economic growth target the same as last year. But according to our Kwon Jang-ho, the focus will be on scrapping the two-term presidential limit. Once ratified, that'll allow Xi Jinping to stay in power indefinitely. Take a look.
The second of the two sessions, or Lianghui gathering, opened on Monday. Premier Li Keqiang began by announcing the government's economic growth target for the upcoming year. Beijing had decided to maintain its growth target at around 6.5% for a second year running. That comes despite the country's economy exceeding expectations last year, hitting 6.9% growth. The conservative target is seen as a signal that the government is trying to rein in the nation's spending, reduce debt, and improve overall financial stability.
We must remain committed to the general principle of pursuing progress while ensuring stability and to the new development philosophy. We must guide and stabilize expectations, improve living standards, and promote sustained healthy economy and social development.
However, economic issues at this year's gathering have been overshadowed by political ones. Last month, Beijing announced that it would be scrapping its two-term presidential limit, clearing the way for President Xi Jinping to stay in office beyond the end of his second term in 2023. That decision is expected to be ratified during the course of the two sessions over the next fortnight. The president's political philosophy, known simply as Xi Jinping thought, is also expected to be integrated into China's constitution. These moves essentially elevate Xi to the same level as China's first communist leader, Mao Zedong, and although it has caused alarm in some circles, the two sessions is largely seen as a rubber-stamping ceremony with little objection raised by the 5,000 or so delegates attending.
If a good leader comes to power, we should let him remain in that leadership position forever. In this way, there is continuity. It's great.
This is the choice of history. This is the choice of the Chinese people. It's what the Chinese revolutionary cause needs. I really support it.
The ending of term limits and other proposed policies will be put to the vote on Sunday. Kwon Jang-ho, Arirang News.
The Shape of Water broke the dry spell of sci-fi or fantasy movies winning Best Pictures at the Oscars. Guillermo del Toro's latest project to feature a mutant fish also helped him bag a string of honors at the 90th Academy Awards. Best Original Score, Production Design, and Best Director. Frances McDormand was named Best Actress for 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. Best Actor went to Gary Oldman for his portrayal of Winston Churchill in Darkest Hour. Pixar's Coco unsurprisingly nabbed the Best Animated Feature Film as well as the Best Original Song prize. Basketball superstar Kobe Bryant appears to have made a quick and very successful transition after hanging up his jersey. An animated short film earned him an Oscar. Actresses who publicized sexual assault allegations against disgraced producer Harvey Weinstein also took to the stage during the annual event. Time to turn to Michelle Bach at the Weather Center for the updates you need. Michelle, the weather in Seoul was quite nice. It looks like it's time for us to vacuum pack our winter clothes.
Well, Daniel, in fact, on Korea's traditional calendar, tomorrow is Gyeongchip, or the Day of Awakening from Hibernation, which signifies the coming of spring. And that sounds about right. Our daily highs tomorrow will be about 3 to 5 degrees Celsius higher than today. Now, but you're going to have to dress warmer in the morning since it'll actually be colder than today, with Seoul starting at -1 degree Celsius. Daegu will also dip into minus territory, while Busan starts at 3 degrees. Like I mentioned, the mercury will make its way up during the day, Seoul peaking up to 10 degrees, Gwangju and Busan topping out at 14 and 9 degrees. And in general, it's going to be a nice clear day due to the high pressure front. And the weather is expected to stay warm until the nationwide rain hits us on Thursday, so don't put away your coats just yet. I'll leave you with the weather conditions around the world.
That's all we have for you on tonight's edition of Arirang News Center, wherever you may be tuning in from. Thank you for watching.